Hello, hello. It is so fantastic to have you here. If you're new to me, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you. My name is Lauren Minnick, and I'm the host of the Intentional Teacher podcast. So I am going to be sharing all about what happened to me today back in 2018 when I literally forgot about report cards the day they were due. But before I do, I just had to share something that I am super, super excited about this week. And that is that I get to do a professional development workshop for a local BC district virtually tomorrow that I'm super, super excited for. We're going to be talking all about simplifying your lesson planning. I made a unit planning template today to go with it that's editable. It's all about how you can simplify your unit planning so it doesn't take you forever and you can feel that sense of calm and preparation when you are planned in advance without over planning. So that is what I am going to be doing this week. So I'm super excited about that. And if you're listening and you are involved in your school or your district's professional development committee, or you know someone who's in your professional development committee, I am ready and excited actually to be doing more professional development workshops coming up in 2024. So if you are interested and you want to hear more about what that might look like for your school or district, just send me an email or even message me on Instagram at I am Lauren Minnick, and I would be happy to touch base with you. So let's get to today's episode. So back in 2018, I remember I came into class, and at the time I shared a room with a colleague, and I came in. He was such a lovely teacher. He was, I would say, at least 7 years younger than me. He was maybe one of his first or second years teaching. And I remember I rolled in because I had this little like rolly suitcase that I had all my notes and my marks in. And I came in like it was like any old morning, and we were chatting, and he goes, "How did report cards do? How did report cards go?" And I was like, "What?" And I remember this feeling like, "Oh my God, report cards are due like today." And I had this sinking feeling in my stomach, like truly nauseous, like, "Oh my God, I cannot believe I forgot report cards. Like, what kind of teacher am I that I literally forgot report cards? Like, who does that?" Now, at the time, I had just been getting back from maternity leave. I wasn't completely working full time, so that's why I wasn't always around for staff meetings because sometimes they fell on the day that I taught, and sometimes they didn't, to be fair. And I was also building up, at the time, I was just creating teaching resources. So I was working on that. I had my little one at home. I was getting used to basically just being back in the swing of things as a working parent for the first time. And I literally forgot report cards. And he could see it on my face, like, did you, what do you mean you forgot them? Oh my gosh, not my finest moment. So anyway, he was very kind about it. He did not share that I forgot report cards, thankfully. And I remember calling up my husband in a panic. My husband is a teacher and a high school teacher too. And I said, "Oh my God, I literally forgot report cards today. Can you please pick up our kid after school?" Because usually I was home first. "Can you please pick up our son because I need to write report cards like today." Thankfully, I think we had an hour or two of like prep time to, I don't know if it was like to complete report cards. I don't remember how. I know I had a little bit of extra time that day. And somehow, and I'm going to tell you how, I managed to completely complete, I managed to completely write my report cards that day, and most importantly, without my admin noticing. And I want to share with you how I did it. But before I do, I want to emphasize that this was before I created the system I now call the intentional 10. So the intentional 10 is designed, yes, to help you save at least an hour a week, but most importantly, to make the best use of your prep times and to know what is coming up. And that was the piece that I was missing. I was so in the day-to-day. I was organized, but I wasn't thinking far enough ahead. And that's why that day came up without me even friggin' realizing it. So I created actually a guide. I go into it in more depth in my program called Intentional Teaching for Teachers, but I do have a free guide that will show you how you can start using the Intentional 10 in your teaching, in your working life. And I highly recommend it. It is one of the biggest game changers. It was a huge game changer for me. And it also has been a massive one for my clients. So I'm going to link that up in the show notes, the Intentional 10 guide, and that will help you, because that is the reason that I forever forgot my report cards. But I still managed to complete them without my admin noticing. I remember sitting at a student desk and like hammering through to get them done on time with the sense of very clear, I would say calm urgency, because I was like, okay, no, I got this. And I'm going to tell you how I did it, because I did have other systems in place at the time, 3 in fact, and those were the reasons that I got my report cards done so incredibly quickly. So download the Intentional 10, check them on the show notes. That is one of 2 resources that I am sharing in today's episode. Okay, so here is how I did it. I'm going to share 3 systems with you that are going to help you speed up your report card writing as well. Okay, so the first thing is I had a marking system. So now it's now what I call the mindful marking framework. So I rarely had a pile of marking or grading to do like I did before I had kids. So I didn't have to worry about last minute corrections. So that's the first thing. If you are listening to this and report cards take you a really long time and they really stress you out, you need to think about what's the thing that's really causing the stress. Generally speaking, it's one of two things, maybe 3. The first is it might be all the marking and grading that you need to catch up on, especially if you are an upper grade high school teacher. That is usually the most time consuming thing if you are a high school teacher. If you are an elementary school teacher, it might be the comments that are stressing you out. And so it's good to, or even like anecdotal assessments, like, are my assessments fair? Do I have enough evidence? All that kind of stuff. So it's good to get clear on what's the thing that's stressing you out about report cards. At this point, when I was teaching high school, the big thing that was the big stressor was marking. So, and then the thing that might be stressing you out as well is reactions of others, reactions of your admin, if you did a good enough job, what your students are going to say, what parents are going to say to you. And sometimes that's worth exploring too. And that's more of that mindset piece, is how are you going to manage expectations, communicating fairly, and also clear boundaries, so you're aware of your responsibility and your students' responsibility and where that distinction lies. So those are usually the 3 kind of stressful culprits. But for me at that point, as a high school teacher, generally the thing that took me a lot of times was marking. And so when I created the mindful marking framework and got my marking done on a very regular basis, it was a huge game changer. So then when the day that I forgot report cards, I didn't have very much marking to catch up on. I think I had a couple of assignments that were handed in late or something like that. But other than that, I did not have a lot of marking to do, which made a huge impact on getting my report cards in. So that's tip number 1, is to have a marking system so you don't have a ton of marking to catch up on come report card season. The next system that you are going to want to include in your teaching, and this is the other thing that I had in place already that made a big difference, was a student follow-up system. So again, in high school, grading and marking is the big thing that takes a lot of time for report cards. And if you are spending your time running and chasing up after students to get handed like late assignments, that can take forever. And I don't want that for you. So it's super important to have a system in place so that you do not have to chase students down to get missing assignments. So when the day came in 2018 when I did not know the report cards were due, I already had all my students' assignments, so I wasn't worried about chasing them down and having missing assignments. So having a student follow-up system is very, very key. The last, and this is going to be important if you're in elementary or in high school, is to have a system for generating comments. So if you're in high school, it might be, and even with elementary, but I'm going to give a caveat to elementary, is to create a comment bank system. So I already had one from previous report cards that I just had to modify for my students this year. And so that was really easy. So it might just look like having a comment bank that you modify. And I can do another episode maybe on this later because this is a whole other topic in and of itself. But you want to have it so that it's not like you're not creating a new comment for every kid, but you also want it to be personalized too. So it's kind of like a fine line. And if you want more info on that, you can DM me at Lauren Minick. I am Lauren Minick, but that's what I would say is a comment bank system that allows you to really have personalized comments, but that are still systematic and like with templates so that it's not taking you forever. So you have comment banks. The other thing I was going to say about this is if you are an elementary school teacher, the other thing that you're probably going to need as well is a way to have anecdotal assessment or regular assessment, because it's not just about the grades. Like a lot of times it's about observations. So you might also need a system for your anecdotal evidence or anecdotal assessment so that you can give appropriate assessment as well. And also a system that allows you to kind of comment on things that students have worked on in the past. So that could be part of your commenting system. So it might be, if you're in high school, it might just be a comment bank. But if you're in elementary, or if you require more detailed comments around your actual assignments, you might also need a comment system that includes like that formative assessment, what you went through, and that can be something that you work on throughout the year. I hope that makes sense. Let me know, send me a message if it doesn't, because I'd be happy to share a little bit more about that in detail. So the 3 systems that I had in place that allowed me to complete my report cards in a day without my admin noticing were a marking system, what I call the mindful marking framework. And that, by the way, is the second resource that I am going to share in the show notes. So if you want to check that out, you can click the link and download it. It's the mindful marking framework. Again, I go into this in more detail in intentional teaching, but you can see overall if you have it in place and what you might need to add to your marking system. So number 1 is a marking system. Number 2 is a student follow-up system. And number 3 is a comment bank or comment creation system. So those are the 3 pieces, but I wanted to also just give you a little bit of encouragement and kind of draw out how this unfortunate story is also relevant for you. So the first thing is that everyone makes mistakes. I think sometimes, at least if you're like a lot of the teachers that I work with, I think there's this idea that as a teacher, we shouldn't be making mistakes, or everything should be up to a really, really high standard. And if something fails, I hear a lot of teachers that really beat themselves up about it. Honestly, even though it was embarrassing at the time, it really isn't that big a deal that I forgot report cards in the great scheme of things. If I was forgetting them all the time and I had a whole bunch of other problems, okay, maybe, but I mean, everyone makes mistakes. And if you've made a mistake recently, just know that you're human. I know it's obvious, but it's important to have that reminder, I think, sometimes, that everyone makes mistakes, and it's truly okay. You'll find a way to fix it. So that's the first thing. The second is that having systems is going to make report card writing so much easier. And what I mean by systems are a predetermined set of decisions for like-minded tasks. So if you have repetitive tasks that you do, which you do as a teacher, there are tons, like reporting report cards, for example, you want to have a system that's like a predetermined set of decisions. So you're not in that decision fatigue, and things will move so much faster when you're not always having to make decisions. When you've already pre-created your decisions and these are the steps you follow, things are going to get so much faster for you and a lot less stressful and a lot less, and it's going to take a lot less energy from you because you're not going to experience as much decision fatigue. And that's actually, I mean, when I had to share because one of my clients, Mason, had the same experience. So it's not just me. Mason said that what used to take her weeks of stress and preparation for report card writing, she's a grade 6 teacher. Now she can do it after she joined intentional teaching in just a few hours during her prep times. So truly, when you have systems in place, it can make a huge, huge difference. And then the last thing, of course, I mentioned at the beginning, is to use the intentional 10 to plan your week in advance. This was my huge downfall, and I see it so clearly because I did not have a practice at home with my own kids and at school to look ahead. And so I was always in the day-to-day, and it was a more stressful, urgent place to be in. When you have a regular routine of looking in advance, planning out your time, and I go through this in more detail in the guide and intentional 10, that is going to make a huge, huge difference. So learn from my mistake, download the intentional 10. It is in the show notes, and I'm sure it'll make a big, big difference for you because it has made a huge difference for dozens of teachers at this point. So I hope that you found this episode useful. I hope you found it maybe a little entertaining, that, someone would have the audacity to forget report cards. So thank you so much for listening. It means so much to me that you listen in and that you are, even if you've subscribed, if you've shared it with a friend, it is super, super appreciated. And I'm so grateful that you are listening and that you are here listening to the Intentional Teacher podcast. I will see you next week for another episode.